The girl was about to be sold into the palace as a maid, but instead of feeling sad, she was overjoyed. Before leaving, she picked up her 1-month-old baby brother and told him that once she achieved success and glory, she would definitely come back to see him. Knowing he too was about to be sold to a wealthy family, she held back her tears and told him he must wait for her. From then on, the girl's extraordinary journey in the imperial harem began. New palace maids were always bullied, and one day the older maids ordered her to sneak food from the furnace room. That night, she and her fellow maid tiptoed toward the furnace room. The surroundings were pitch dark. Her companion lost her courage, so the girl went alone. But as she turned the corner, she encountered the person who would change her fate, a young heir disguised as a eunuch. He covered her mouth and pulled her aside, because a guard was passing nearby. He brought her to safety and sternly asked why she was wandering around so late at night. Before she could answer, another little eunuch crawled out from under a building. Their noise drew the attention of soldiers, and the three of them quickly hid under the house until the danger passed. The heir ordered the two to kneel, accusing them of nearly ruining his plan. While scolding them, the little eunuch protested, "You're just a lowly eunuch too. Why are you lecturing us?" The heir almost revealed his true identity, but quickly pretended to be last year's most outstanding recruit. He gave a false name, calling himself Wuda, and intimidated the two into silence. After some squabbling, the three became companions, and the heir led them to the furnace room. They ate their fill, and the girl even carried a basket of food back for her fellow maid. But soon, Wuda insisted on carrying out his plan. He wanted to go to the soldiers' hall, which was where the crown prince was imprisoned, a forbidden place. The little eunuch panicked, but the girl reminded him that since Wuda had helped them, they should show loyalty in return. Reluctantly, the eunuch followed along. As they crossed a small bridge, both Wuda and the eunuch reached out their hands to help the girl. She hesitated but finally took Wuda's hand, leaving the eunuch sulking. At the entrance to the soldiers' hall, the eunuch refused to go further. Before leaving, he asked the girl's name. She said her name was Song Yuan, while he introduced himself as Das Ho. After he left, Song Yuan stood guard at the door while Wuda entered. Inside, Wuda found his father imprisoned in a wooden crate for 6 days and nights, barely clinging to life. His father told him to stay strong and not resent the king. With tears in his eyes, Wuda offered him pastries, but his father asked him instead to retrieve a painting from the Eastern Palace and present it to the king as proof of his loyalty. Meanwhile, Das Ho, on his way back, spotted the king's entourage heading toward the soldiers' hall. Alarmed, he ran back to warn Song Yuan and Wuda. The three hid just in time. When the king entered and saw pastries scattered on the ground, he knew someone had been there and ordered an immediate search. The next day, the palace was in turmoil. Investigators checked the shoes of all palace maids and eunuchs, since muddy footprints had been left at the scene. Eventually, Dasho's shoes were found covered in mud. Just as he was about to be silenced, Wuda appeared and dragged him before Song Yuan, demanding he identify his accomplices. When Das Ho faced Song Yuan, she was terrified, but he remained loyal and refused to betray her. As Das Ho was taken away for punishment, Wuda realized his friend was in danger and quickly sought out Song Yuan. Unaware that she was friends with the heir, a group of palace maids ganged up to bully Song Yuan. By chance, the heir passed by and immediately stepped in to protect her, shocking her with his sudden change of identity. Wasn't this the same little eunuch she had snuck food with last night? The heir didn't explain. He simply taught the bullies a harsh lesson and ordered them to be reported for punishment. Then he pulled Song Yuan aside and asked for her help. He needed to deliver his father's painting to the king, who was currently outside the palace on an inspection tour. Since he didn't know the way, he asked Song Yuan to draw him a map. But as he questioned her about directions, it became clear he knew nothing of the outside world. Finally, Song Yuan decided to take him there herself. While accompanying his mother to a private residence, the heir slipped away and met Song Yuan at the marketplace. To avoid pursuers, they disguised themselves in commoners' clothes. During the escape, Song Yuan fell and injured her arm. Seeing her bleeding, the heir gently bandaged her wound and even gave her his own pouch as a keepsake. At that moment, Song Yuan began to feel affection for the young man before her. To reach the king's inspection site faster, they secretly boarded a carriage, But just as they arrived, soldiers stopped them for inspection. The carriage driver was smuggling illegal liquor. In order to silence the soldiers, he killed them and stuffed their bodies into the cart. Songyuan screamed, but fortunately the heir covered her mouth. The carriage turned around and headed back to the distillery. While no one was watching, Songyuan and the heir crawled out of the cart. Just as they were about to escape, they realized the painting was missing. As they searched frantically, the men entered. The heir told Songyuan to slip away first, but as soon as she left, he was discovered by the men and locked in a woodshed. There, he unexpectedly met Dasho again. It turned out that after Dasho had been taken into custody earlier that morning, he was tortured and forced to confess that a eunuch named Wuda had delivered food to the imprisoned crown prince. The officer produced the heir's necklace, and Dasho immediately recognized it, saying it belonged to Wuda. Still unaware that Wuda was actually the heir himself, Dasho became a pawn. Since the officer was loyal to the heir's faction, he knew this matter could implicate the heir and decided to hand Dasho over to thugs to silence him. Believing Wuda had ruined his life, Dasho lashed out in anger. Meanwhile, Songyuan, desperate to save the heir, reported the illegal brewing operation to the authorities. The officials dismissed her and told her to get lost. Helpless, Songyuan suddenly spotted the heir's pouch. At the very moment the heir and Dasho were about to be executed, soldiers' voices rang out. Songyuan had brought them by claiming the crown prince was being held hostage. In the chaos, the three reunited. Songyuan even managed to recover the painting. Together, they escaped over mountains and finally reached the royal entourage. But when the king saw the heir dressed in ragged clothes, he flew into a rage, saying he had disgraced the royal family. The heir begged the king to forgive his father and confessed that he had been the one to deliver food to him the previous night. This only made the king more furious. He ignored the painting and ordered the heir to be bound, accusing him of treason. The heir no longer addressed him as Your Majesty, but cried out, Grandfather, pleading with him to show mercy for family ties and release his father. The king coldly told him that he was finally experiencing the cruelty of the royal clan. Despite ministers' collective pleas, the king personally grabbed the heir and dragged him off, unmoved by his desperate cries. At that moment, a messenger reported that the crown prince had died. The domineering king was shaken, while the heir was overwhelmed with grief. The king then told his ministers to pretend that nothing had happened that day. Having lost his own son, the king finally understood the pain of bereavement. Afterward, Songyuan and Dasho were expelled from the palace, while the heir was reinstated. On the road, he once again encountered the two companions who had risked their lives with him. Childhood friendship is always the purest. Despite his noble status, the heir stepped down from his sedan and rushed to them. The three swore to be lifelong friends, always protecting one another. With tears in his eyes, the heir reached out to seal the promise with a pinky swear. Songyuan and Dasho never imagined that the future king of the nation would call them friends. They replied that no matter what, they would always stand by him. For the sake of reunion, Songyuan knelt for days in front of the overseer's residence, begging to be sent back into the palace as a maid. The overseer ignored her, and she eventually fainted. Out of pity, a servant carried her inside to rest. When Songyuan awoke, she secretly glimpsed men in the backyard handling firearms. At the same time, in the heir's own quarters, a batch of guns was discovered. Some ministers immediately accused him of hoarding weapons with treasonous intent. Since the crown prince had just died, the king worried the heir might seek revenge for his father. Pressured by ministers, the king ordered all of the heir's servants interrogated under torture. His position as crown prince was now in grave danger. The heir confronted the king, firmly declaring that he had never plotted treason and had no knowledge of the weapons. Hearing his grandson's conviction, the king hesitated and assigned an official named Nancy to investigate in secret. Using trusted aides, Nancy discovered 2 banknotes for the purchase of firearms, both belonging to the late crown prince's men. This suggested the crown prince had orchestrated the matter. Whether the heir knew anything about it was another question. But under torture, one of the heir's servants confessed that the heir and the crown prince had conspired together. Acting on the king's orders, the heir was arrested and thrown into prison. Ministers spent the night kneeling outside the hall, begging the king to depose him. At last, the king agreed to put him on trial the next day. Outside the palace, Song Yuan also heard of his arrest over the firearms. She remembered the guns she had seen at the overseer's house and reported it to Da Shou's uncle, a eunuch. He immediately took the information to Nancy. Sensing foul play, Nancy reported directly to the king. By then, the heir was already seated in the execution chair. Just in time, the king arrived and ordered all the firearms found in the heir's quarters to be brought forward. A minister was asked to examine them and explain the markings and dates. The minister was stunned. The markings revealed that the weapons had all been manufactured under his own jurisdiction at the imperial armory. The king took the firearms and read aloud the manufacturing date. It coincided with the date of the crown prince's death. This proved the matter had nothing to do with the crown prince, nor with the heir. Clearly, someone was trying to frame the heir. The overseer who had been stockpiling weapons was also brought forth, and the truth became undeniable. The king punished the ministers who had been shouting to depose the heir, stripping them of office and ordering investigations. The heir narrowly escaped disaster, but the forces plotting in the shadows were still powerful. The overseer and officials who had been imprisoned were silenced before they could be tried. Meanwhile, Song Yuan was also targeted for assassination, but Da Shou's uncle arrived in time to rescue him and took the two of them out of the capital. When the heir came looking for them, he found only the wreckage of their home, torn apart by killers. Holding Song Yuan's clothing in his hands, the heir was filled with guilt, believing it was his fault they had suffered. Far away, Song Yuan and Da Shou continued to think of him. When they returned to the capital 10 years later, Song Yuan had become a servant in the Imperial Painting Academy, working as a lowly tea attendant. To select the finest painter, the heir personally set the challenge, to capture the beauty of blooming lotuses and the melancholy of fallen petals. All the official painters competed, but a humble tea servant happened to see the prompt. By lamplight, he quietly sketched the scene on a scrap of discarded paper. The next day, the academy director reviewed the submissions, but none matched the heir's theme. Just as he was shaking his head in disappointment, he stumbled upon the tea servant's drawing. With a single glance, he saw it perfectly captured the test. He ordered the tea servant to be summoned. At that very moment, however, the tea servant was being punished by jealous painters for wasting paper and ink. They accused her of breaking the rules and wanted to flog her 30 strokes and expel him. The servant explained that she had only used discarded materials, but they refused to listen. Just as the punishment was about to begin, the director arrived and angrily rebuked them. In an academy of art and learning, how can you act lawlessly? The painters argued that the servant had violated tradition by painting without permission. The director retorted, "Where is the rule that says a tea servant cannot paint?" Silenced, the painters had no choice but to release her. Still, in the male-dominated academy, the servant faced constant bullying and exclusion. Later, when the heir came to ask about the test results, the director said none of the painters had met the requirement. Then he remembered the tea servant's drawing and presented it. The heir needed only one glance before his eyes filled with tears. On the painting was his childhood and his long-lost companions. Trembling, he asked the director for the servant's name. The answer stunned him. It was the very girl he had been searching for these 10 years. He immediately ordered that Song Yuan be brought to him. But when the director went to the servant's quarters, she was nowhere to be found. No one knew where she had gone. The heir sent attendants to her home, but they found the house empty. It turned out Da Shou had quarreled with some ruffians, and Song Yuan had been kidnapped as a hostage. The heir personally set out, arriving just as Da Shou was home. But before soldiers could be dispatched, Song Yuan had already been sold into the black market and was locked in a woodshed. In her despair, she overheard someone calling for official Li, a patron of the academy. She cried out to him for help, but Li assumed he was imagining things and paid no attention. The heir grew frantic, ordering his attendants to pull every string possible to locate Song Yuan. As the matter escalated, Li finally realized she was truly missing and rushed to inform Da Shou's uncle. He recalled hearing her cries near the black market. Da Shou immediately rushed there. At that moment, thugs were preparing to beat the defiant Song Yuan. Da Shou grabbed a stick and single-handedly struck them all down. Song Yuan was finally rescued. Soon after, an attendant arrived to tell her the heir had been searching for her all along. Song Yuan, in tears, confessed she had always thought the heir had forgotten their childhood bond. She never expected him to still remember. Back at the academy, she gazed at the painting, the moment she had shared with the heir. Suddenly, a voice called her name. Turning around in disbelief, she saw the heir standing there. After 10 years apart, they were finally reunited. The heir apologized for failing to protect her back then. Song Yuan, though hurt, was deeply moved that he still remembered her. Just as they were about to pour out their hearts, others from the academy arrived, forcing the heir to leave in haste. Unaware of her true connection to him, the other servants continued to bully Song Yuan. But only a few days later, the heir issued an official decree for the academy to bring her forward, leaving the servants envious and shocked. When the heir later visited the academy to evaluate the work, he was about to enter the hall when a girl among the palace maids caught his eye. His gaze burned so intensely that even the court officials noticed. They explained that she was Song Yuan, working as a tea servant who had come to deliver tea to the evaluators. But the heir didn't seem to hear. He simply stared at her in a daze. The thoughtful eunuch reminded the heir that it was time to enter. The heir came back to his senses, about to step inside, but then turned again to give Song Yuan a gentle smile in farewell. This left Pinggong, who was nearby, sighing silently in his heart. Leaving the palace, Song Yuan unconsciously placed her hand over her chest. Though one was in the heavens and the other on the earth, she had long been unable to forget the heir. A few days later, the heir summoned Song Yuan and Das Ho to the palace. Knowing Song Yuan loved painting, he specially gifted her a painting. Unconsciously, he held her hand, encouraging her not to abandon her art just because of her humble status. Pinggong happened to witness this scene. He realized then that Song Yuan was the one the heir truly loved. He quietly lowered his head, and only then did the heir and Song Yuan let go of each other's hands. The heir explained that Song Yuan had been his childhood companion who once saved his life. Gentle and kind, Pinggong did not dwell on it. But the heir's mother could not tolerate her son being enchanted by a lowly tea servant with a brush. She summoned the head of the painting academy and ordered him to replace Song Yuan with someone else for the royal portrait. When the director returned, he discovered that officials and soldiers had already been sent to arrest Song Yuan, accusing her of violating the law by painting for the royal family. At that moment, the heir arrived, restrained the soldiers, and summoned the director and their commander into a room. He declared that as acting regent, he was instituting reforms. The first principle was to appoint talent regardless of status. He gave an example. If a tea servant possessed skills equal to a formal painter, then she should be allowed to serve the royal family with her art. Under the heir's orders, Song Yuan was permitted to take part in the Painting Academy's examination a few days later. News spread quickly. Ministers who opposed the heir waited for Song Yuan's failure so they could use it to attack his reforms. Pinggong also worried deeply that the heir might jeopardize state affairs out of personal affection. Meanwhile, Song Yuan herself was anxious and unwilling to cause the heir trouble. But the heir personally went to comfort her, reigniting her determination. The next day was the exam. Song Yuan was the only woman present. The topic, paint an autumn landscape. All the candidates began at once. When Song Yuan opened her pigments, she found every color had been tampered with and mixed, completely unusable. She appealed to the proctor for a new set, but he, deliberately making things difficult, insisted the pigments were fine and accused her of making trouble. Helpless, Song Yuan pressed on, painting with nothing but black ink. When her work was reviewed, the first examiner dismissed it outright. What kind of autumn scene is this? Not a hint of color. He tossed it aside. The results were soon announced. The heir stood by silently, waiting. The first 4 names were called, and Song Yuan had already lost hope. But then the director declared the 5th place, Song Yuan. Startled, she rose to her feet. Entering the top 5 meant she would become an official painter. The heir was overjoyed, but the other candidates were furious. They accused Song Yuan of winning only through the heir's patronage. How could a painting without color embody the golden hues of autumn? At that moment, the senior examiner spoke. He explained that the excellence of Song Yuan's work lay in its artistic conception. Autumn exists because it contrasts with spring. In her painting, the light brushstrokes evoke spring, the heavy strokes autumn. Between the two lies autumn itself. Though her work lacks golden tones, it is filled with the longing of autumn. This reasoning silenced the crowd, and Song Yuan's reputation spread far and wide. Soon after, the director assigned her to assist a court painter in making a royal portrait. But when the painter first faced the king, his hands trembled with nerves and he could not draw. The officiant panicked. How could they keep the king waiting? The king too urged them to hurry, which only worsened the painter's fear. In desperation, someone suggested letting the tea servant try. The officiant opposed it. How could a lowly tea servant have any skill? But the king, intrigued, ordered Song Yuan to give it a try. Once the brush touched paper, her lines flowed smoothly. In no time, a vivid and lifelike portrait emerged. The king was extremely pleased. As the two prepared to leave, the eunuch stopped Song Yuan, saying that the king wished her to remain in the palace that evening. The court painter returned and spread the news everywhere. Soon, everyone was saying that Song Yuan had risen in a single leap, and that she was destined to become part of the king's harem. Song Yuan sat anxiously in a side chamber when suddenly attendants entered, helped her change clothes, and brought her before the king. Her heart was full of dread. She feared today she might not escape disaster. But instead, the king ordered ink and brush to be brought and asked if Song Yuan could paint a plum blossom. Song Yuan began to paint with steady strokes, and as the brush danced across the paper, the king's eyes grew moist. His late son had loved painting plum blossoms, but now they were separated by life and death. Song Yuan's painting stirred the king's cherished memories of him. The next day, as soon as Song Yuan arrived at the painting academy, an eunuch came with a gift from the palace, a jade hairpin. Those who had once bullied her, thinking she was now destined to become a concubine, rushed to apologize. Even the court painters not only apologized but began addressing her as "my lady." Song Yuan had little time to enjoy this. Before long, palace attendants summoned her again. This time, it was the heir's mother who had called her. As soon as they met, the lady warned Song Yuan sternly. Though she had won the king's favor, her lowly status had not changed. The heir's mother insisted that Song Yuan's position as a painter was due only to her influence over the heir, not her own talent. She scolded that it was because of Song Yuan that the heir had given his enemies ammunition and had come under attack from officials. To separate the two, she arranged for Song Yuan to be sent abroad to study painting in the Qin kingdom. When Song Yuan was gone, the heir finally realized what had happened. He raced on horseback to the riverbank, only to find the ferry gone and the waters empty. He rushed to the painting academy and demanded to know why Song Yuan had been sent away so suddenly. The director explained it had been by the recommendation of the heir's mother, which gave Song Yuan this opportunity. The heir confronted his mother, who lied, saying she had recommended Song Yuan only because of her outstanding skill, and that Song Yuan herself had been eager to broaden her horizons. The heir could say nothing more. A year later, Song Yuan, having lost her sponsor, struggled on alone. The heir's mother had expected her to die on the journey, but instead she was saved. When the heir saw the gravely ill Song Yuan, the feelings he had long buried came surging forth. Fearing for her safety, he argued fiercely with his mother. In the end, he compromised, promising he would treat Song Yuan only as a friend, and begged his mother not to harm her further. Only then did the heir's mother relent. But soon the heir faced new troubles. The king, weakened by senility, was manipulated by the queen's faction into considering stripping the heir of his title. In desperation, the heir produced a painting his late father had once entrusted to him, saying it could protect his life. But he could not understand its hidden meaning. He gave it to an eunuch and asked that it be delivered to Song Yuan, hoping she could decipher it. Before long, Song Yuan discovered the secret. When she opened the painting, she noticed that all the little figures within were pointing in the same direction. Following their fingers, she found that they led to a small turtle. Inside the painting, the small turtle's mouth seemed to hold something. Curious, Song Yuan rubbed it twice, and to her surprise, a hidden layer of paper came loose. Beneath it, she discovered two secret letters. These letters were no ordinary writings. They held the power to change the fate of the royal family and of Song Yuan herself. She rushed to present them to the king, But the eunuch stopped her, saying it was already late at night and the king was resting. Song Yuan quickly improvised, saying that only days ago the king had ordered her to complete a painting and deliver it to him as soon as it was done. The eunuch relented and announced her presence. The king, muddled by senility, could not recall if he had indeed given her such an order, but summoned her in his eagerness to ask. Song Yuan entered and presented the secret letters. The moment the king saw them, tears streamed down his face. They bore the handwriting of the late crown prince, recording the truth of the events that had led to his death. The king finally realized he had been gravely mistaken, that his own errors had cost his son's life. His misunderstanding of the heir was cleared. Not long after, the king passed away, and the heir ascended the throne as the new king. For her great service, Song Yuan received the king's favor, and he intended to take her into the palace as part of his harem. But the heir's mother fiercely opposed this, saying Song Yuan's birth was too lowly. She had already chosen a new consort for the king and accused the king's loyal minister of overstepping by recommending Song Yuan, warning it would bring disgrace to the royal house. After dismissing the minister, she summoned the king's favored courtier. The woman she wished to put into the palace was none other than the courtier's sister. The courtier hesitated. If his sister entered the palace, he would become kin to the royal family, a position vulnerable to accusations of meddling in politics. The heir's mother told him to think it over. But the king's loyal minister also summoned him, warning that if his sister entered the harem, the charge of outside relatives interfering in court affairs would surely be used against them. The courtier promised to refuse. Yet after a night of reflection, when summoned again by the heir's mother, he agreed to send his sister into the palace. He had his own calculations. The king's loyal minister was infertile, but if his sister bore a son, he would one day reach the height of power. Unaware of this betrayal, the king's loyal minister innocently went before the king, recommending Song Yuan as a new consort, saying he had even gained her consent. The king, surprised and overjoyed by the minister's supposed generosity, was deeply moved. That night he summoned Song Yuan to ask her feelings directly. Just as she was about to speak her true mind, a minister urgently called the king away, leaving her in the study to wait. By ill chance, the heir's mother arrived and, seeing the light in the study, entered. There she found Song Yuan, who had dozed off while waiting, sitting unknowingly in the king's dragon chair. Furious, she demanded to know what Song Yuan was doing there, then ordered her dragged out, accusing her of mocking the royal family and deceiving both the king and the king's loyal minister. She sneered that Song Yuan should stop daydreaming, she would never be accepted into the royal house, and banned her from ever stepping into the inner palace again. The heir's mother ordered all present to keep silent about the incident. When the king returned, she claimed she had dismissed Song Yuan only to protect his reputation from scandal. Dutiful as he was, the king did not argue. She then announced she had already chosen his new consort, the courtier's sister. The king hesitated, but the courtier argued that such a match would only secure his loyalty and make him work harder for the throne. The next day the king summoned Song Yuan once again. Not wishing to cause him trouble, she concealed her true feelings, declaring she would live her life as a court painter. The king understood. Song Yuan was telling him she did not wish to enter the palace. The king's loyal minister also summoned her, and she gave the same answer, that she would remain a painter all her life. Thus the king married the courtier's sister, bestowing on her the title consort Yuan Ping. Yet on their wedding night, the king did not go to her chamber, but instead spent time with a tea servant. The neglected new consort was enraged, summoning the tea servant the next day, accusing her of seducing the king. She demanded the servant be punished. But the king's loyal minister arrived in time and stopped her, scolding Yuan Ping for being petty and punishing an innocent servant without cause. Yuan Ping protested that the servant had seduced the king, but the minister knew full well the truth. The king's heart belonged to the tea servant, Song Yuan. She warned Yuan Ping to stop her jealousy, and even ordered her to copy scriptures daily as a lesson. Then she left. But Yuan Ping was not one to yield. She immediately summoned her brother, the courtier, weeping that she had merely wished to question the events of the previous night, but the king's loyal minister had humiliated her publicly. Outraged, the courtier promised his support, emboldening Yuan Ping even further. On the day of the banquet, Song Yuan suddenly collapsed. The loyal minister stayed behind to care for her, sending the king to attend in her place. When the courtier learned this, he panicked. His true target had been the loyal minister, not the king. He hurried to recall the assassins and stop the poisoning. At the feast, an eunuch disguised as a palace servant had already tampered with the king's food. Just as the dish was about to be served, a loyal attendant whispered urgently to the king. Alarmed, the king was told not to eat. But he had already taken a bite. Soldiers rushed in, the food was seized, and an inspection showed no traces of poison. Meanwhile, guards discovered a suspicious soldier attempting to flee with a eunuch. A fight broke out. Cornered, the eunuch swallowed poison to silence himself, but the soldier was captured alive. Through interrogation, the plot was traced back to none other than the courtier, the king's most trusted minister. The courtier admitted all, confessing that his true aim had been to poison the loyal minister, not the king. When he discovered the king was attending in her place, he had tried to halt the plan. Still, betrayal from his closest ally cut deeper than any blade. The king wept, torn between rage and grief. To him, the courtier had been more than a subject. He was a comrade, a friend. The ministers demanded the courtier's execution. After sleepless nights of anguish, the king issued his decree personally. But when the sentence was read aloud, it was exile, not death. The king himself oversaw the judgment. To him, the courtier was first a brother-in-arms, only second a minister. They bid a sorrowful farewell. The courtier, overcome with tears, was led away. Not long after, he perished in exile. The king went to mourn him, weeping bitterly. From the day he rose from heir apparent to the throne, through wars to the present peace, the courtier had been the executor of his dreams. His fall left the king bereft. The king never truly recovered from the betrayal. Night after night, he sought comfort in Song Yuan's company. Only with her could he find some measure of peace. But the heir's mother despised Song Yuan, constantly picking faults in her. Soon, a great banquet was to be held in the palace, with all the wives of high officials in attendance. As custom required, the consorts of the inner court would be presented and questioned. The king's loyal minister insisted on bringing Song Yuan along. On the way, they encountered the heir's mother. She ordered Song Yuan to step aside, scolding the loyal minister. Bringing her to such a gathering only disgraces the royal house. How could she possibly answer the lady's questions? But the loyal minister stood firm. Determined to showcase her favored daughter-in-law, she deliberately directed questions toward He Ping. The first question He Ping answered fluently, drawing smiles of approval. But when the second question came, she faltered. She didn't know the answer. At that moment, the unworthy Song Yuan asked to respond herself. Reluctantly, the heir's mother allowed it. Song Yuan's reply was poised and well-reasoned, earning the admiration of all the ladies present. The heir's mother's plan to humiliate her had backfired, leaving He Ping embarrassed. Not long after, both Song Yuan and He Ping became pregnant. The king's loyal minister supported Song Yuan, while the heir's mother threw all her weight behind He Ping. Each hoped their chosen woman would bear the royal son. The king seized this moment to petition his mother to officially grant Song Yuan a title. Since she now carried royal blood, the heir's mother reluctantly agreed, bestowing upon Song Yuan the rank of third-class consort. Song Yuan, deeply grateful, wept when permitted to call the heir's mother mother. Though outwardly recognized, Song Yuan remained an outsider in the heir's mother's heart. The old lady summoned the most skilled midwives to examine He Ping, who declared, "The signs are favorable. A prince will surely be born." Overjoyed, the heir's mother devoted nearly all palace resources to He Ping, ignoring Song Yuan. At last, both women went into labor on the same day. The heir's mother kept vigil outside He Ping's chambers, while the king's loyal minister stood outside Song Yuan's. Cries of newborns came from both rooms. The heir's mother eagerly awaited the news, but when the midwife emerged, she announced it was a girl. Disappointment struck hard. Meanwhile, Song Yuan had given birth to a son. As the lowest-ranked consort, she now held the greatest fortune, producing the king's heir. The king's loyal minister wept with joy, offering heartfelt congratulations. 4 years the royal house had lacked a son, and now hope had come. Even the heir's mother quickly composed herself, hurrying to Song Yuen's side to cradle the child with tears of relief. The king, delighted, first went to comfort the neglected He Ping before visiting Song Yuen and his newborn son. Gazing at the child, he declared, "This boy shall be the future king." And he kept his word. 3 years later, the little prince became the treasure of the entire palace. The king formally named him crown prince, despite strong opposition from ministers who disdained his mother's low rank. Defying all pressure, the king elevated Song Yuen from third-class consort to first-class noble consort. Just as she seemed to have reached the peak of fortune, disaster struck. Her beloved son suddenly fell gravely ill. Before he reached 4 years of age, he died. Song Yuen, already carrying another child, was devastated. Her grief turned into fear. She poured all her love into her unborn baby, but when imperial physicians offered to examine her pulse, she refused. In secret, she summoned her childhood friend Das Ho, now a palace guard, and asked him to smuggle in a trusted physician from outside. Though puzzled, Das Ho complied. After examining her, the physician turned pale. Song Yuen was afflicted with a hidden, incurable illness. Though treatable to some extent, the condition would shadow her life. Crushed, Song Yuen made him swear to tell no one. She knew that if the truth became known, her position and her unborn child's future would be doomed. Das Ho wanted to ask the physician about her condition, but he remembered Song Yuen's warning not to pry into it. So he held back his words and let the doctor go. But a secret can't be hidden for long. Soon after, Song Yuen collapsed. The king's loyal minister rushed to her side, urging her to accept proper treatment. But Song Yuen insisted it was only grief overwhelming her, and that she just needed quiet rest. At first, Das Ho obeyed her wishes, but upon hearing of her collapse, he could no longer remain silent. He sought out the physician and learned the terrible truth. Das Ho immediately informed the king. The king ordered Song Yuen brought back to the palace. Seeing her weakened state, he realized how gravely he had erred. Yet even then, Song Yuen begged him, "Please let me keep this child. I cannot endure losing another." But the king, holding her trembling hands, sobbed in reply, "And I cannot endure losing you." From that day on, he scoured the realm for remedies, demanding reports from every physician in the royal hospital. But each answer brought only despair. Song Yuen refused medicine, fearing for her unborn child. Desperate, the king knelt before her, pleading for her to drink. She relented only for his sake. After endless searching, Das Ho finally found another foreign-trained physician across the borders of Qing. But when the man examined Song Yuen, he shook his head. It was too late. The illness had taken root too deeply. The king grew frantic. He pored over books himself and sent Das Ho racing back to Qing in search of Western doctors. Meanwhile, Song Yuen, knowing her time was short, asked to paint a final portrait of the king. Though it tore at his heart, the king agreed. The two of them sat across from one another, gazes locked. Every stroke of her brush carried her love. She wished never to forget his face. He prayed never to lose her presence. But her pulse grew weaker each day. The king anxiously awaited Das Ho's return. At last, word came. He had found the foreign doctors and was on his way back. That very moment, Song Yuen finished her last painting for the king. A sudden gust of wind scattered their keepsake tokens. She reached after them but fell by the pond, clutching the symbol of their bond. The king rushed to tell her of the doctor's arrival, only to find her collapsed, barely breathing. He gathered her in his arms, crying, "Please, hold on a little longer, they're almost here." Song Yuen reached out, caressing his face one last time, and whispered her farewell. Then, in his embrace, she passed away. From childhood companions, to loyal servant and prince, to king and consort, their lives had been bound together. He had spent his whole life loving her, she, her whole life being loved by him. Perhaps Song Yuen was fortunate, but fate was cruel. And so their story ended, with grief, with devotion, and with a love that endured beyond death. Thanks for watching. Please like, subscribe, and drop a heart for encouragement.